Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Sheridan Report. You can find them on Twitter at Sheridan Report. If you want to bet the games, you might as well have a little bit of inside knowledge. Go check out Bobby Sheridan there. And, of course, the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. Make sure you check that out. I am your co-host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm always good, man. Excited to talk some boxing. You know, we've been kind of sifting through the barrel for some newsworthy stuff, and I think we found a little something tonight.
Well, this is the thing. The title of this show is Corruption in the Heavyweight Division. We could probably do a show over the next 17 days talking about the corruption in each individual division. But, of course, right now, this is the hot topic with, of course, Tyson Fury not fighting Deontay Wilder for a second time. Anthony Joshua fighting Jarrell Miller. And the thing that struck me was when I saw that Dominic Breazeale was named the mandatory challenger for Deontay Wilder in the WBC. The thing that I don't understand, and maybe you can enlighten me, maybe you can't, Dominic Breazeale's ranked fourth. Dillian White is ranked number one. And the mandatory is the guy that's ranked number 4.
Well, I mean, how do you explain it? I mean, if you know, I'm going to, and all it is it's a political favor. It's a political favor for Al Heyman. You know, they want to keep Deontay Wilder viable, right? You don't want to put him in against a credible threat, and White is that. You know, let's not act like Wilder's some killer. You know, he's not. You know, he got over the hump against Ortiz, and you know he's knocked out a number of other serviceable fighters, but you know White is a credible threat. And so they're not going to put him against him right now. You know, White is he's kind of on the outside looking in right now, and I understand why he's upset because his resume is far better than Dominic Breazeale's is. And so you ask yourself, right, if you're a person who doesn't follow boxing all that closely, how does a number 4 guy become mandatory over a number 1 guy? Well, first off, boxing's a messed up sport, you know, so you can never follow those sorts of things. I mean, I know that's the way it works in most other sports, and that's the way it should work. You know, you work your way in a contention, you should be fighting the guy, right? Well, unfortunately, and as I've said a bunch of times on a bunch of shows, you got to follow the political associations here, okay? Al Heyman is real tight with the WBC. He's real tight with the WBA. You know, Bob Arum is real tight with the WBO. WBO is real friendly to other, you know, European fighters and yada, yada, yada. Anyways, that's all this is. Breazeale represents a guy who's close to being ranked, you know, so he's not too far on the outside, right? He's not as big of a no-hoper as some of these other guys. He has proven that he's a little bit tough, right? He does have some amateur background, and he also represents a personal beef between Wilder and himself. So if anybody followed this storyline a long time ago, I think, what was it? Breazeale posted on his Facebook, I think a couple of years ago, that Deontay Wilder's people attacked him verbally, you know, backstage or something like that. I don't know. It just turned into this big beef, and you know they had I think they had a couple exchanges somewhere. I could be wrong there, but it just turned into this personal thing. So they're going to use that as a storyline as well. You will hear that in the build-up to the fight, and so this represents something not terrible. And it also represents a favor to Al Heyman. I mean, obviously it's nonsense. This isn't the way it should be. But unfortunately, that's just what we're getting.
Well, and the thing that gets me is I see people on social media tonight talking about, well, you know, Wilder has to fight him or he'll have to give up his strap.
Oh, Jesus.
He'll give up his strap, man. He has to fight him. My point is this. I think they chose to fight him. I think that's why it was mandated. But on top of that, if people would quit being so stupid and caring who wears one of these 4 belts, the whole world would be a much better place. Because this is why the best doesn't fight the best. This is their out for that.
Exactly. And like we were talking about, you look at some of the rankings, okay? So you see that White is number one, and you still have people in Wilder's camp justifying this. I mean, come on, man. Wilder should be fighting White, and like you said, this was premeditated. This decision was made with the involvement of Al Heyman, not without. So this isn't as if, the WBC was, they convened a council and, went over the ins and outs and, all the stats and whatnot. No, it's not like that at all. That's not how boxing works most of the time. These are political associations, right? Al Heyman's like, hey, I need my guy, Deontay Wilder, to be a viable candidate for heavyweight supremacy. And, you got to give him somewhere, somebody relatively soft, somebody that he can potentially score a knockout against and, get Joshua or Fury down the road. I mean, that's all it really is. It's like the Lomachenko thing, too. It's like when people are like, oh, he's got to fight him. No, he doesn't. Okay, look at if you really follow your own line of logic, and I'm talking about these people who are trying to justify mandatories. Look what happened with the WBC before this. So the WBC said they were sanctioning Wilder Fury 2, and then all of a sudden they pull back on it, saying that it's not going to happen. So it's not as if these alphabet soup organizations are the end-all be-all when it comes to discussions. They're not. They're just playing along with what the promoters want and the fighters want, and again, it's all in an effort to maximize revenue for each individual party involved. It's not, again, these are not people who are disinterested in what's going on. They're a part of the problem.
Yeah, and if you look at Dominic Breazeale, what he did to beat a number one contender is in December of 2018, a few months ago, he beat Carlos Negron. And then 13 months before that, he beat Eric Molina. And, you go back another year, and Anthony Joshua, basically starched his ass in 7 rounds. So when you see that, we know what's going on. But the thing that blows my mind... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but you have to remember, okay, so somebody actually wrote an article about this, about how Breazeale earned his mandatory position. Okay, and this is the length some people will go to try and justify this nonsense. And you guys got to step outside this. So what happened was Dominic Breazeale, when he beat Eric Molina, that represented a mandatory shot. So that was one of those stupid eliminators. Okay, so Breazeale won that against Eric Molina. And people are using that as justification for him getting a shot. First off, I think that was a little while ago. Second off, Eric Molina is not somebody who should be in an eliminator anyways. This is not a guy. I don't think Eric Molina has ever broken the top 10 in the heavyweight division. And you see what Eric Molina, when he fought Anthony Joshua, he got beat up. And like you said, you didn't point it out specifically, but Dominic Breazeale it's Anthony Joshua leftovers.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we using this as some sort of grade? I mean, Breazeale really hasn't done anything since that fight. Yeah, you can say, oh, well, he was in an eliminator. Okay, again, Eric Molina is not a representation of somebody who should be involved in an eliminator. This is Anthony Joshua's leftovers. If you want to look at it on the bright side at all, you could say, oh, well, I guess we'll see how they compare in terms of performances. Well, so far Joshua has the lead, but I'm not, using Breazeale as some sort of, standard bearer of where Wilder's at. I don't buy it.
Well, the scary thing is the WBC probably has the best of the 4 rankings, because when you look at the WBA, well, of course, the WBA, Anthony Joshua is the champion, but Manuel Charr is the champion, and Joe Joyce is the WBA gold champion, and then the immortal Trevor Bryan is the mandatory contender. How the hell does that happen? Frederick Kendo's ranked number 3.
Yeah, well, I think Fresno Kendo has the WBA by the balls. I honestly believe that's what it's got to be, because Fresno Kendo has been hanging on for years now. I mean, this is a guy who hasn't had a significant win in I don't know, a decade or something. I mean, this is basically like Shannon Briggs except, he won a court case. I mean, we're talking about a similar level of, Briggs was a better fighter, but, I'm just talking about in terms of where they're at age and probably skill level at this point. But it doesn't make much sense that Frezzo Kendo keeps pulling out of these fights, and yet he's still highly ranked. I don't get it. I don't know if the lawsuit I don't know if it dictates that, no matter what, he gets an alphabet trinket shot, or I don't know. But he just keeps hanging around and hanging around. I don't know if he's getting paid some sort of income to do so, or what he's doing in the meantime. But it's atrocious. It's to give the WBC some credit, they usually are. They usually do have the best rankings of any of the organizations. Of course, the IBF seems to follow their rules more closely than anybody else's, but of course that's also because they're stationed in the USA and they have they'll get put under a microscope once again because there was already a federal case brought against them, where they found out Bob Arum was paying them, $100,000 and all sorts of other stuff. So, they've got to operate. They've got to run a tighter ship than these other organizations, but it's a joke. I mean, Trevor Bryan, who did he beat? What does he do? Frezzo Kendo? I mean, come on, man. Manuel Char.
Didn't he beat BJ Flores or some shit?
Yeah, exactly. And Flores is a lot like Frezzo Kendo. BJ Flores is almost like the Frezzo Kendo of the cruiserweight division, where he was more like a fringe guy, than a real contender. But, he just keeps hanging around. I don't know what the hell's going on. But the WBA has become so bad, in just everything they do and so blatant. It's just out and open. And the sad thing is
they all are.
No, you're right. I mean, because you look at the WBC, they're adding more alphabet titles. Go look at 140 pounds. I mentioned this in an old article that I wrote. They have like 4 titleists at 140 pounds. The Ramirez – he's the full titleist, and then you have Prograis, who's like an interim titleist, and then Josh Taylor, who's like a silver titleist, and then you have somebody else. I don't know what the hell he is, but yeah, they're all operating out in the open and being blatant about the whole thing. And boxing fans, we bitch and bitch and bitch, but nothing's going to change because nobody's really holding them accountable. And it's as if these organizations know that the fighters are going to pay the sanctioning fees regardless. So, they just seem like they operate with impunity. And the worst part of it all is that Gilberto Mendoza runs the WBA, and he's a lawyer. That's his job. I mean, it's pretty pathetic if you ask me, but this examination of the rankings shows you why you shouldn't take it seriously. So whenever we're bringing up discussions, don't say, oh, hey, well, he was ranked highly by this organization or that organization. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and when you move over to the IBF has Kubrat Pulev ranked number 1. There's no reason to have him ranked number 1. Number 2, not rated. There is no number 2 ranked IBF heavyweight in the world. Number 3, you get Agit Kabayel, whatever the hell it is. I know who he is because he beat somebody not too long ago, but he shouldn't be number 3. Adam Konaski at 4. Robert Helenius is ranked number 6 by the IBF. He is ranked 2 spots ahead of Luis Ortiz. He's ranked 7 spots ahead of Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker is ranked 13th. Robert Helenius is ranked number 6.
Wow. I mean, bravo, right? Try to make sense of all this, guys. I mean, a lot of you should just go visit these pages just, as a joke, just to get a laugh from time to time. But how the hell does Helenius get rated above Parker?
How the hell does he get
Parker
rated?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since Robert did anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how does he get rated at all? I mean, it's Joseph Parker, nearly had Dillian White, who's a top 5 guy, out of there, right? I mean, Parker was a top 5 guy himself before he fought Anthony Joshua. I mean, it's pretty clear who the superior operator is in that equation. But again, go ask these people. Go stick a mic in one of their faces and say, hey, why do you have it this way? Why do you have it that way? And I'm sure you'll get all sort of convoluted logic about, this guy did this on that date and whatnot. But again, it's all political nonsense.
Well, no, what you'll get is no commenter to walk away from. They're not even going to try to defend it. And this is the thing. The WBO is like 10 times worse than all of them. The WBO has Dillian White at number 1. That's fine. Tom Schwarz is number 2. He's a German who's only fought overseas, who hasn't fought anybody of note that I could see at least. Jarrell Miller at number 3. Tyson Fury at number 4. So Tom Schwarz has done more than Jarrell Miller and Tyson Fury. Oscar Rivas, who had a one-punch knockout over Bryant Jennings, is number 5, but this is where it gets stupid. And, yeah, it gets stupider. They got a Chinese fighter by the name of Zhang, ranked number 6. They got Tyrone Sponge at number 7. Kyotaro Fujimoto is the 8th ranked heavyweight in the world. Junior Fa is number 9. Bryant Jennings still cracks the top 15 at number 11. Christian Hammer's number 12. I imagine that was before his last fight against Luis Ortiz. I mean, this is the thing. There's like 5 guys here in their top 15 I've never even heard of.
Yeah, well, to me, it makes a little bit of sense that they have a German so highly ranked because the WBO, that's how they made their inroads. That's how eventually they became quote unquote legitimate. Was you had guys like Arthur Abraham and again a lot of the European guys that we talked about before. Mikushevsky, Nassim Mohammed. I mean, they really got their start as a European level title, and so it makes sense if you follow the political connections that they would favor European guys like this. But I mean, I heard a Japanese name in there, a Chinese name in there. I mean, I've seen the Chinese guy fight, and again, it just absolutely makes no sense. I don't know how you justify. I don't know how you justify these guys being in. Sorry, but yeah, Junior Fa. I mean, what's his ranking on BoxRec? Probably in the top. He's probably a top 50 guy.
Let's check out the heavyweights in BoxRec. Let's compare it. Not that they could be any better, but we know they can't be the worst, and I'm betting they're probably going to be better.
Oh yeah, they'll be better.
Heavyweight, what's got to be better? All right, so you go to BoxRec. The number 1 heavyweight is Anthony Joshua. Wilder, Fury, White, Povetkin at 5, Miller at 6, Pulov at 7, Ortiz at 8, Brazil at 9, Konaski at 10, Schwartz is 12, Sergey Kuzman, who's in a couple rankings, is 14th. Agat Kabayel, or whatever his name is ranked in the top 10 by 2 of the organizations. Otto Wallen is ranked in the top 5 by 1 and in the top 10 by 3 out of the 4. The Zhang guy is ranked number 19, just ahead of Joe Joyce. Yeah. And see, what I don't understand is this. I mean, hell, Nathan Gorman and Dubois belong in the top 15 before most of these guys.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, because these organizations have a history of discriminating against the other organization's ranking. So, whenever they have somebody, I mean, and that's all it is. And of course, when fans start complaining about, why isn't this guy ranked? Why isn't that guy ranked? Again, it's all just a big discrimination practice and political association.
Well, how about this? Here's an example. Shifat Isufi, the one that's going to fight for the title or that might fight against Billy Joe Saunders, he is ranked by no other organization, and he's the number 1 WBO contender. He is not ranked in any other division.
What's his BoxRec ranking?
Oh, Shifat? Hold on, let me pull it up. That's super middleweight. I bet Shifat's ranked really high.
Oh yeah, got to be top 5.
Yeah, you would think.
Maybe in his country.
Pound for pound.
In his country.
Maybe. We'll see. Hold on here. Oh, I got to hit go. All right. They got this. This is too complicated for somebody like me to work. Well, it looks like Shifat's not in the top 25. Shifat is ranked 30th, but yet he's ranked number 1 by the WBO.
Yep. And if I was to ask this questions to to people listening in right now, what do you think it is? Again, I can answer this easily. It's a favor for Frank Warren. I mean, come on, Billy Joe Saunders hasn't done anything at 168 to warrant a shot, and especially his opponent hasn't done anything to warrant a shot. So, again, it's just nonsense. It's just complete
How
nonsense.
about this?
And again,
Do you know how far Rocky Fielding dropped after the Canelo Alvarez performance?
now what's he at, like 32?
He's number 7 by
Oh,
the WBA.
well, that's well, no surprise there, right?
And
Well, and
when you look at this, John Ryder is the number 1 ranked contender for the WBA, but he's ranked 11th, 12th, and unranked by the other 3 organizations.
well, I think this is part of the reason why I don't think, maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't think the IBF has a social media platform or presence. I know the WBC does. I know the WBA does. But I don't recall seeing the WBO on there, and I don't recall seeing the IBF. So I'm pretty sure that the IBF is absent on social media, and maybe I'm wrong there, but I know they're definitely not interacting with people like Suleiman does. Suleiman will actually comment on a regular person's comment. So you see that from time to time, and he'll try to justify his nonsense, and he's gotten himself into trouble for that because there was a big thing, I think it was last year, when somebody called him out about Canelo not being in the Vatican program when initially Suleiman said that he was, and then it was proven that he had not been in there. So I think that's a big reason why a lot of these places stay away from engaging people, because they know. I mean, there's just too much. I mean, I see people at them all the time on Twitter, especially the WBA and WBC, always talking crap about them. And, generally there's just no response there. And you're not going to get it because they're just going to keep doing what they do. I mean, they're subject to no real jurisdiction. They just kind of have free reign over, their own operations. But yeah, I mean, some of these guys, and I've heard people say that these organizations need to rank the other champions or title holders of other organizations, right? So you're making them mandatory, and they think that that's going to solve the problem. And of course, I've got a much simpler solution. Just eliminate all the belts but one. I mean, then
yeah, but that's never going to happen, because this is how these guys are getting rich off of the fighters, and the fighters are too stupid to just say no, and the fans are too stupid to just say, I know what's going on, I'm not going to watch it, because you got people out there that cheer for Deontay Wilder that are running around, well, Tyson Fury's scared. I hate to tell you this, but Tyson Fury is not scared. Tyson Fury got hit with Deontay Wilder's biggest punch, and he got back up and won the rest of the round. He's not afraid. The problem here is the promotional teams, the ESPN, the DAZN, the Showtime. All this shit is so scattered that unless fighters actually start to do something about it and fans start to get pissed off about it, nothing's ever going to happen. It probably ain't even going to happen then, unless the fighters are the ones that stand up and say something.
Yeah, well, and I think the problem with boxing fans too is they're pretty complacent. It's almost like if you signed up to be a boxing fan, it's like you're shaking hands with the devil. You already know what that comes with. You're going to get seedy decisions, bad refs, corruption. I mean, you already acknowledge that these things are already baked into the boxing cake. So a lot of people, they get outraged for a day or so, and especially in today's, time when controversies are just, with our 24/7 news cycle, they come and go, in minutes. You have something serious drop, and then they're, worried about the Kardashian and, Kylie Jenner, or whatever her name is, being the youngest billionaire in the world or something, So it's just kind of tough to get everybody on board and work together, because there's so many different factions, and it's like you said, not only within the organizations themselves, but within fans too. You have again, you've got the Wilder camp, and you've got the Joshua camp, and you've got Fury has his camp now. So you just get there's so many divisions. It's like how do you round everybody up and get them together? But you don't right now.
Well, you're not going to because the people that run these are not honest people. So they could give less of a shit. And if it doesn't hurt them at the box office, but what we're seeing is this. I think the problem is the boxing fans, they get really mad. Just stop watching. I mean, that's why the ratings have gone down so much. I mean, hell, you know yourself, if you'd have put any fight on network TV 10 years ago, everybody would have watched it just to try to get another fight on network TV. But now we're seeing such shit on network TV and free television that, I mean, people have given up on it, I think. And you see the UFC taking off. And I think the worst thing that can happen in sports, whether it's for a team, a player, an organization, or a sport itself, is apathy.
Yeah, I think you're right because that's complacency. It's you get, and I would say that's even a deeper issue with America as a whole. But I don't want to get political or anything, but yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of us are apathetic. It's like, oh, here we go again. What can you do? Round and round we go, and it's like it never ends. I mean, I'm a bit more optimistic. I think things could change. It'd take a lot of strong arming, but again, it would just be tough to get it all together, and there are just so many things in place that prevent this from ever happening. That it's just not likely. But it is a day and age where things change quickly, and and in 40 years I've seen backwater deserts transformed into urban centers and whatnot. So nothing's outside the realm of possibility. But
still the same.
Yeah, I know, right? So a place like the UAE in the Middle East, used to be just kind of it used to just be a backwater, and nobody really cared about it. And I think in 40, 50, 60 years or something, now it's a fledgling metropolis. It's doing real well for himself. The citizens make good money. But yeah, boxing's still stuck spinning its wheels in the mud and having the same damn problems, if not worse problems, than it had even 50 years ago. Even when the mafia ran things, I still think there was at least some sense of fairness, I mean, there was a push. You look at the Ring magazine, and that was kind of what you went off back in the day. They pretty much dictated who the champion was. And, again, there was a sense of fairness. Like, hey, you should give the top guy a chance, and sometimes, a lot of times it did happen. Sometimes it didn't for one reason or another, but there was just a stronger sense. Now it's just so many different factions and channels. And we feared this from the beginning, but they're all a joke. They're all a damn joke.
Well, and the thing is this. A guy like Marvin Hagler, if he was around today, they could probably keep him from ever getting a title shot.
Oh, yeah, they'd probably do him they'd probably do him worse than they did Golovkin. I mean, I think I made that sort of connection in the article that I wrote, but I mean, imagine if Marvin Hagler also had to grab two other titles, on top of the WBC and WBA. Just imagine what you could have done. Alan Minter or something, could have run around England for a little while or, bought him off. I mean, there are just so many ways to divert a guy anymore, right? There are so many pitfalls, right?
Well,
okay, well,
did
just
divert him until Minter was the champion, and to give Minter some credit, I mean, Minter wasn't afraid to fight him.
Right, yeah, but I'm just saying, people react differently in different circumstances. So maybe Fallon Minter was around today.
Oh yeah,
and he if yeah, I mean, if he had a guy like Billy Joe Saunders hanging around or Chris Eubank Jr. or whatnot, right, and you get one soft touch a year, I mean, there are just so many ways to delay a fighter anymore, right? You can say, hey, well, you need to, like, what do they do with Golovkin? Okay, in Germany, the WBA created a special status for Felix Sturm, so he didn't have to fight Golovkin. Okay, then he comes to America, sorry, and has to wait until Daniel Gill fights him, and then with the WBC has to, win the interim belt and, wait for Cotto and Alvarez and all these guys. I mean, they can pay you off, right? I mean, if a fighter doesn't want to enter the ring with you right now, they can pay you step aside money. Another organization could say, hey, well, you have to defend against your mandatory, or we're going to strip a title from you. I mean, there are just so many different ways. There's no doubt they would have done Marvin Hagler dirty.
Yeah, because they do guys dirty all the time here. They did Fury dirty. He beat Wilder. I mean, the only people that don't think that are the people that have their heads so far up Deontay Wilder's ass that they couldn't see the fight anyways. Canelo Alvarez, you fight him, you're going to get done dirty, one way or the other. I mean, Triple G's legacy was basically ruined because, Canelo was afraid to fight him when he should have fought him 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and he waited till he got old, and then he beat him. And the problem with that is this. There wasn't really anybody out there for Triple G to fight. And Triple G beat everybody that was in front of him. He didn't step aside or duck anybody. And then when he gets his chance when he's 36 years old, and it's bullshit. And, I saw some more on social media, and we got a question here, and it's about Canelo and how clenbuterol is not steroids. But I can tell you this, it's not steroids, but it is definitely a performance-enhancing drug. And a rule is made to stop performance-enhancing drugs. He violated it and still got a title shot 6 months later. And that's wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing with sports. With boxing, when you have, again, it's fractured not only with fans. Sorry, man, jeez. But it's fractured not only with fans and alphabet organizations and whatnot, but you have this stuff being done on a state-by-state basis. So imagine that Canelo Alvarez had been popped in California. It's likely that they wouldn't have given him any suspension at all. It's only because the Nevada State Athletic Commission had a policy in place, like most other places don't, that if you get caught with something, the onus is automatically on you. You get popped, you get docked for it automatically, right? So it's, I forget what John called it, but it was one of those things that, whether you knew or whether you didn't know, you should be conscious of what you're putting in your body, especially when you're a top-level athlete. Now we're talking about Canelo could be earning more than any athlete across any sport over the next 5 years. Of course, he would have to win every single fight. And, that's going to be a tough thing to do.
He'll have help.
Well, yeah.
He'll be all right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like everybody already recognizes that if you fight Alvarez, you're already down on the scorecards. But, yeah, I mean, he's right. Yeah, clenbuterol is not a steroid. But I also think people miss the point in getting too caught up in steroids themselves. I mean, if you look at WADA's list of banned substances, it's huge, okay? And it's not all about anabolic steroids. People, I think because of pop culture.
Drugs, not necessarily
exactly. Right, exactly. I mean, but this is the thing is, if you've ever seen Bigger, Stronger, Faster, I recommend going and watching that because it's a bit like Icarus, but it's a different topic. It's more about bodybuilders. They talk about all the people who do performance-enhancing drugs, and it trickles down to the most simple of sports, ones that you wouldn't really think are doing it. They're talking about how archers are doing downers so they can concentrate better. I mean,
slows down their heart rate and all that.
Exactly. I mean, there are drugs that help you recover faster from workouts. There are drugs that help your stamina, drugs that help, lung and blood counts and tons of different things. It's not all about steroids and, bulking up and getting bigger and whatnot. That's just one of many, many things that an athlete can do. And clenbuterol is serious stuff. I mean, Victor Conti was on record talking about, its potency and why, sports that actually have governing bodies will suspend you for a long time for doing it. And I know there was a case about a cyclist, and it's not completely relevant to the Canelo situation because, again, they're different situations. But what it shows you is that a governing body with standards will suspend you for a long time. They will take it seriously because they know that these athletes should be aware of what they're putting in their bodies. And somebody like Canelo is no different. I mean, you often hear the Mexican team who I think they all got popped for clenbuterol or something one year. And then what did they do after that? They made the necessary reforms to, they had I think a team cook, and they were only buying certain things from certain grocery stores.
Plus, they made sure they cycled off right so they wouldn't get caught again.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They were paying their whoever was putting their ped plan together a little bit more money to get it right this time. And of course, that happens all the time too. So, yeah, I mean, this person's right. It's not a steroid, but still, you should be. Here's the thing, though. People should understand this too, is that there's evidence that putting things in your body like performance-enhancing drugs, those can have lasting effects for years, arguably forever, after doing them once, after cycling off once. Okay, so your body just it reacts that way once you do that.
You have an advantage.
Exactly. So that's why these penalties in boxing, and again, if Canelo had been popped in California, he might not have had any time at all served, right? I wouldn't have been surprised if he got popped in California and nothing would have happened. But again, it was only because he got popped in Nevada that he had to serve a suspension. Of course, they said, oh, well, he was cooperative and whatnot, but the problem is when you have it on a state-by-state basis, you're going to get these varying punishments, and it just goes back to the ethics of the sport. A lot of the sentences that they hand down are going to be political.
All right, Jeremiah, you got anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Oh man, I don't know. There was a good number of on this day, so it was. It's like how many of them do I want to cover? Really, I mean. I did briefly want to go over the Steve Cruz Antonio Esperagoza one because I did write about Antonio Esperagoza, and I do think he's an underrated fighter. Problem is, I wish he would have fought Jeff Fenech or Azuma Nelson. Unfortunately, he didn't. But Steve Cruz was the guy. For those of you who haven't touched up on your history or aren't familiar with what happened at featherweight.
If you're a Deontay Wilder fan, Jeremiah is going to explain to you who Steve Cruz is. Go ahead.
Yeah. I got to be careful with the things I say on air now, but.
Oh yeah, you're a racist. I forgot. Go ahead.
Yeah. Got to be careful. Don't want to lump people together, even if Anyways, the Esperagoza Steve Cruz. So Cruz is the guy who upset Barry McGuigan. It was hot in Vegas, and he ended up getting the victory. And Cruz was actually a pretty good fighter. Strong amateur background, a quality operator himself. But Esperagoza, in my opinion, he was a bit like Alexis Arguello stylistically. He was pretty smooth. He was kind of lanky like him, had good power. Really nice right hand. I think he was a little bit quicker than Arguello, but he wasn't he didn't have as much diversity in his attack, and obviously he wasn't as good as Arguello was. But he just beat Cruz up that night and ended up taking the featherweight title and held on to it a few years. But I did want to ask the crowd if somebody can send me a message, because I've always wondered this. Because if you look at the Ring magazine, they had Antonio Esperagoza as their champion for a few years, and then they took it away. And I have never been able to find an explanation as to why that is. So I don't know why they demoted him. Maybe
they did demote him because he lost the title in early '91, and then he never fought again, right?
Yeah. Right. And so I think it was 2 years before that. I think, or maybe it was 1 year.
1989?
It could be. But all I know is that he was their champion, and then all of a sudden he was not. And I know Jeff Fenech and I think Azuma Nelson went through that division around that time. So maybe they were saying, hey, he isn't fighting the guys he's supposed to. He's not taking on his mandatory. He's not taking the challenges.
Yeah, he didn't fight hardly anybody. I mean, the only guy that I really remember him fighting outside of Cruz was Marcos Villasana, who we talked about before, and that fight was a draw.
Right, yeah. No, you're right. I mean, he did fight a lot of guys who were not on his level. And actually, I mean, I've seen his entire career. He became
Did
one of
you
those guys.
watch
I think he was.
the? Wait a second. Did you watch the Espargoza Villasana fight?
Yeah, I've seen all the fights.
Okay, because really the difference in that fight is in the fifth round they took a point away from Marcos Villasana, if I remember right.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you're correct. I mean, it's been a few years since I saw the fight, but we talked about Villasana when we were talking about Azuma Nelson, and the dude was he was a hard nosed guy. He was a scrapper, had good power, and I mean he fought tooth and nail with Azuma Nelson and some other guys. So I mean, he was obviously a damn good fighter. But Asparagosa, I liked his performance against Cruz, but it seemed like eventually he started relying too much on his power. And it could get the trick done against some of the lesser guys, but against a guy like Villasana and when he was eventually upset, it didn't get the job done there. But he was a damn good fighter. I mean, also on this day, you had Pernell Whitaker and Buddy McGirt. You also had Deontay Wilder's second pro fight was on this day too.
Ooh, yay!
Ooh,
Was that Harold
yeah.
Sconiers? Because I want to see that video if anybody has it.
Oh, God, can somebody please get that? I know it's hiding out there somewhere. Somebody's got to have it. I've even checked the forums for it to see if maybe somebody's got it hiding in their basement or something. But I mean, maybe we can
bad boy disappear.
Maybe we can just ask the company that produced it and see if they can get us a copy. But I also want to talk about Wilfred Benitez versus Antonio Cervantes because I think that's that performance does get a lot of play, because Wilfred Benitez was so young. I mean, he was 17 years old, but he was fighting, a guy who would eventually go into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Cervantes. And I was a little perturbed when I watched it about the scorecards. I mean, two guys had it right, but that should not have been a close decision on any of the scorecards. I thought Cervantes was dominated. I thought Cervantes is, again, as good as he was, I never found him a great fighter.
The thing about that is this, though, too. Cervantes was like a 4 or 5-1 favorite in that fight. It was a huge upset.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking about a 17-year-old kid versus a guy who had been doing it for a long time. I mean, you look at Cervantes' record, and I don't have it on me now, but I'm not going to bother with BoxRec, but I think he had 91 wins and like 8 losses or something. I mean, this dude was a real veteran of the sport, and I know he beat guys like Esteban de Jesus, and he beat Nicolini Lochi in the rematch, and eventually he ended up falling to Pryor. But to me, Cervantes was a good fighter. He was heavily reliant on his jab. He had good length. I mean, his timing was pretty good. But he seemed to struggle against guys who were really defensively responsible. I mean, real good defenders like Benitez, like Lochi, who apparently, I haven't seen any film on it, but from the scorecards, Cervantes lost, I think, on all 3 scorecards 15-0. So that was pretty much a shutout. I think the only footage you can find is the 15th round. But yeah, Cervantes to me was.
Have you seen Cervantes and De Jesus though?
I watched it a few years back, and I remember thinking, maybe you can correct me, but this is what I remember. I remember thinking about De Jesus. I thought was pretty good with his feints in that fight, and he was connecting with some nice right hands. But I think he got overwhelmed and ended up getting stopped. Maybe I'm wrong.
Because I thought Cervantes handled him easier than Duran did, because I don't think he won more than 2 or 3 rounds in that 15-rounder. And I think the judges had it all about like that too, like in the 148, 134 area.
Okay. Yeah, again, it's been a few years since I watched the fight.
I just got dropped 3 times in that fight.
Yeah, and I remember thinking in that fight, De Jesus to me looked kind of small in that fight. Maybe I'm mistaken. Again, I just remember thinking when I was watching Cervantes fight that De Jesus was pretty good with his counters. And I don't know why I was thinking this, but I was like, that looks like something maybe Kostya Tszyu would do, but he would probably land more efficiently. He'd probably handle the size. There wouldn't be that size differential. I don't know. But, Cervantes was a damn good fighter, but he just never came across as a great fighter to me. He just seemed like one of those guys who kind of benefited from having a junior division, right? Like if he would have fought in Duran's time, I think Duran beats him, and if he has to move up to 147, I think he gets beat there too. But I just think Benitez's performance for a 17-year-old was fantastic, and I thought that was a clear unanimous decision in his favor.
Yeah, Cervantes beat Lochi, huh?
Yeah, he beat him in the rematch,
Yeah,
and I've seen everything.
stopped him.
I've seen everything. Yeah, I've seen everything Cervantes was in, or sorry, Lochi was in. I haven't seen everything Cervantes was in, because you know that era wasn't particularly interesting to me. But Lochi was definitely past his best in the rematch. You know, Lochi was always one of those guys who looked like he didn't belong in a boxing ring. I mean, he was balding. You know, he had a little gut. He just, I mean, he started off as a lightweight, so I think he was probably putting in the hard work then. But you know, he's like smoking cigarettes in between rounds, and he was just one of those guys who had it naturally. You know, just one of those guys you write a lot of folklore about or something. But yeah, he was definitely past his best, and it really wasn't one of those things where Cervantes beat him up. You know, Lochi made him miss plenty, but it just seemed as if Lochi just got old and tired, and you know just couldn't do it, and you know just ended up bowing out.
Well, I think the DeJesus thing was you said he looked small to you in that fight. I mean, DeJesus was really a lightweight, and to fight at junior welterweight, I don't know if it should make that big of a difference, but maybe it did in that fight.
Yeah, maybe. And again, I could be wrong. It's been a few years since I saw the fight. I mean, maybe I'm wrong too. But again, from what I remember, and this is a faint memory, he looked. He just didn't look prime to me. I don't know, but it did seem as if Cervantes' length, maybe it wasn't his overall size, but it looked like at least his length gave him issues because there's something that I can commend Cervantes for doing. It is he was always sticking behind that jab. The problem is I just thought his jab was a little bit predictable, but he jabbed all the time.
Yeah, I think he was a damn good fighter. I don't think he's maybe as great as he's made out to be, but the competition there was not great up until prior from what did DeJesus fight on? I mean, Miguel Montilla was a good fighter. He beat Montilla twice. He beat Saul Mambi. Um, and yeah, I mean, the Aaron Pryor fight, he actually put Pryor on the ground, I think, in the first round in that fight. I don't really remember for sure, but I think he did drop him. But Pryor overwhelmed him. And then after that, he was pretty much done. I think he did have a win over Lennox Blackmore, who got a title shot against Pryor later on, too, and beat him. But yeah, I think he was a hell of a fighter, but I think Wilfred Benitez is a guy that doesn't get his just due a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, especially with that performance. I mean, you know, Cervantes was, I think he was the champion at 140 pounds at times. So, you know, this is not one of those Mike Tyson, you know, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. This is, you know, he was 17 and actually the champion at 140 pounds.
Yeah, and when you look at him, I mean, that's something. He's 17 and you're the champion of the world. And I think that's part of what hurt him, though, because I think by the time he's 22 or 23, he's pretty much done.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've heard he struggled with other things along the way
Yeah.
too. Yeah, and you know, so I'm not too in depth with his. You know, I didn't grow up watching him, but you know, I think you're right, and that's been something that's been that's been something that's been talked about by you know numerous historians and whatnot. Just how he hit a wall early, and you know he still managed to do good things even as he moved up. I mean, obviously at 147 he was excellent as well.
Oh,
In fact, I think he was.
154. I mean, he gave Thomas Hearns a damn good fight at 154 in 1982.
Well, yeah, and didn't he score knockout of the year against Hope?
Oh, Maurice Hope, yeah, to win the super middleweight championship, I think, or not super
Yeah,
middleweight, the super welterweight championship. And yeah, that's a damn good fight too. And a lot of people thought he was moving up over his head. Then I think he fought Carlos Santos after that. That was on national TV. That was boring. And then he beat Roberto Duran easily. And then the fight against Hearns, the thing I remember was I remember watching it. It was actually on closed circuit because they were trying to, build up another Hearns Leonard fight, and yeah, but that's like I think it was like a week or two before her or Leonard announced he wasn't going to fight anymore. But the thing I remember about that fight is it was actually an exciting fight, which usually if you're thinking Benitez, Hearns was a boxer, but I think Benitez, did well for himself in that fight. It was a split decision. I think that Hearns won the fight by probably 2 or 3 points without much issue, but it's boxing. There's always one judge that screws it up.
Always. Yep. It's never
Oh, I
fails.
remember who was on the undercard of that. That was, I think, Lupe Pintor fought Wilfredo Gomez on that fight. Have you ever seen that one, or on the undercard of that?
No, I haven't seen it.
You've never seen, you've got to see that fight. That's a great fight. I think it might have been, I think it was like second in fight of the year behind Pryor Arguello. But Lupe Pintor, almost every fight he was ever in was a damn war. And then I'm not sure, but I think Matthew Saad Muhammad might have fought on that undercard too. But I remember watching it on TV for like $10 or $15. But on TV was like this little cable box thing, and you only got one channel, and it was only on in Indiana from 7 o'clock in the evening to like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then for $2.99 you could buy the porno package, which ran from 1 in the morning to 5 in the morning.
You're all
But
over that, huh?
no, because I mean I wasn't old enough to buy the porno package, but what I was old enough to do was they scrambled it. So it'd be all kind of messed up, but I'm still trying to watch it, even though it's scrambled. And every once in a while, just for a fleeting moment, you'd see a titty.
Those were the best days.
Those were the best days. But hey, we've talked about tits, so there's nowhere else to go but down from here. So we're gonna wrap the show up. Remember, we'll be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock. Tomorrow, Survive in Advance. Me and Steve Risley will be back. I think we're talking baseball tomorrow, which really pumps me up. And today we had Jeff Severson on, who was a player for the Over the Hill Gang, Washington Redskins, Super Bowl VII. Also starred in the movies Best of Times, him and Robin Williams. Also North Dallas 40 with Nick Nolte, Mac Davis, and of course Jeff Severson, so you can check that out also. Please go to iTunes and rate us, give us a thumbs up. Do whatever you can to help us out. We're here every night. I don't think there's any other boxing podcast that can tell you that. If you have any comments, you can always comment at TGTN Boxing, at The Grueling Truth. Jeremiah, what's your Twitter handle? Like at Griffo or something?
Yeah, it's at Griffo's Hanky.
Okay. Yeah, that's a weird name. I know the Griffos. That's a boxer. Where'd the hanky come from?
So it was part of it was an Australian fighter named Young Griffo, and part of his shtick was, he was a raging alcoholic. So what he would do is go into a bar, and he was so defensively sound that he would ask a bar patron to hit him in the face while he stood still on a hanky. And yeah, that's where it comes from.
I think Young Griffo Drunko would have been a cooler name.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't have been bad either.
Okay. We get that changed right away. All right, guys. Make sure you check us out at Grueling Truth also. Go to Facebook, like the Grueling Truth page. If you disagree with us and you want to come on the show and you want to argue anything we say, you're more than welcome. You can send us a message. We'll have you on as long as you're not a dipshit. But we're going to wrap it up for tonight. And I want to remind you that you can find all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.